Get ready for the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast at IdahoSports.com, breaking down District 4 athletics week in, week out. Brandon Baney, joined as always by our resident expert in the Magic Valley, Scott Burton, who today is Joe Vandal. A nice Idaho Vandals flag flying there for everyone who's watching the video version of this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page. So what's going on, Joe Vandal?
Well, it's, we all know the tragedy that happened up at the University of Idaho campus and the loss of life and all that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of schools today that are kind of doing a stadium vigil. So we're all flipping our stadium lights on at 3:00 this afternoon and turning them off at 6. If nothing else, just to show that, the people that were affected by all this are kind of in our thoughts and our prayers, and, just a terrible, terrible tragedy. But, it's moments like this that it's all we can do just to show that we're thinking about them. So stadium vigil today from 3 to 6, stadium lights are going on. And that's why I've got the flag. We're going to run this up the flagpole for that amount of time. And that's why I'm Joe Vandal today.
Very cool. And yes, Moscow as a community has been rocked this year with obviously the senseless killing of 4 college students at the University of Idaho, but Moscow High School as well. Their longtime athletic director and really an icon in the community, Lance Abendroth, passed away earlier this fall as well. So Moscow's really just had a tough go of it this year.
Yeah, and it's really too bad because, he was a staple in that community and really around the state. And then you got this stuff going on. I mean, it's funny how it all just comes in bunches sometimes, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of the Vandals, I did watch their game, their first round playoff game this past Saturday. They played Southeastern Louisiana in football. I watched it start to finish. It was a really entertaining game. They ultimately lost by 3. Did you see how that game ended, Scott?
No, I did not. I was following about 15,000 other games, but I was following the score. So yeah, enlighten me.
So Idaho's down 3. They're driving late. They're lining up for a game-tying field goal with like 3 seconds left, and the kicker comes on and nails it. But Southeastern Louisiana did the classic, we're going to call timeout right as he's kicking. So they got the timeout. He had to re-kick. As he was planting his foot, he slipped on the second kick, and that caused it to just hook it, and he ended up missing it, and the Vandals end up losing. It was really heartbreaking for the Vandals, but
yeah, and I think there was a whole bunch of people that were pulling for the Vandals, to win that game. They competed because there was a lot of people that didn't give them a chance to compete. But man, there was a lot of Vandal fans that day. That's for sure.
Definitely. So that is a football topic. As we said last week, we're kind of closing the door on the fall sports scene. We're now into winter sports. Girls basketball has been off and running for a couple of weeks now. I've talked about how I hate the overlap between football and girls basketball, but it is what it is. So this is kind of our girls basketball preview extravaganza here on the Magic Valley Prepcast. And of course, all of our girls basketball previews are up on our website right now as well, right on the homepage, IdahoSports.com. Boys basketball previews will be coming over the next couple of days. And then we've got some really exciting wrestling stuff headed your way as well. So stay tuned to the homepage at IdahoSports.com for all your winter sports preview type stuff. The first thing I wanted to touch on before we dive into individual teams and conferences, Scott, was across the state of Idaho this year. I went back and counted yesterday. There are 50 new head girls basketball varsity coaches this year. That is just unheard of, right?
Oh my goodness. When I was kind of looking at just here in the Valley, at the coaches and whatnot, it's like, oh my gosh, first year. And it's absolutely insane. I've never seen anything like it before. 50 in the entire state, that is bananas, So, it kind of goes to show how volatile coaching is, and how it's not necessarily a longevity thing anymore for people. You're going to get some of these names we'll talk about that have been around forever, but it is such a revolving door sometimes. And it's not a job for thin-skinned people. It's not necessarily a job for people that want a lot of free time. I mean, because really the landscape of coaching has changed a ton over the course of the last 10 years, let's say. I think in the past, I mean, you would coach, you would take your team to a couple of summer tournaments and call it good. But now it's club, it's AAU, it is year round. And there's just not a lot of people that can dedicate that kind of time, to do it and to do it right and be competitive. And then you factor in, in order to do that, sometimes you've got to be young and have tons of energy. But with that comes family, right? And they're going to want your time. And if you don't have a family dynamic that supports that, well, coaching's not going to win. The family's going to win. And so we're seeing a lot of this that creates turnover because, when I first got into coaching, I was told by multiple people that have been down that road 100 times, it takes a very special person to be a coach's spouse because they are on the journey with you. They are giving up time with you, and the emotional roller coaster that a coach goes on, it takes a toll on families. And so it does take a special person. And I mean, that's probably why I'm divorced, but, but there's a lot of factors that play into that. And as a result, yeah, we do see a lot of turnover. And I think more so now than we have in years past.
Yeah. And so you are the athletic director at Jerome High School. You had to hire a new girls basketball coach this year. Mm-hmm. And I find that not only is it hard to find somebody to coach, but it's hard to find people to apply for coaching positions. I mean, what was your experience like trying to fill that girls basketball position at Jerome?
Well, I think one of the things that has changed, at least in the schools that I am familiar with and know about, and I'd imagine it's the same across the board, is, we're getting a lot more coaches that are out of the building, because back in the day, it was like you were the math teacher and the basketball coach, you were the history teacher and a football coach. I mean, that's just, they went hand in hand. Now you look at your coaches and you can just, grasp them all. And there's a lot of them that are not even teachers. They're just community members that want to help, because we're losing that dynamic as well. The teacher and the coach type thing doesn't exist as much as it used to. So this process, we lost our girls basketball coach to family. It was exactly what I was talking about. Little kids, it got to take care of their family first. And so that became a priority, and I completely support it and understand it, and so the coach that we hired this year, not a teacher, but a very strong community member, but also has an army of little kids, and so it's like juggling all of this is tough. I think people that want to apply for these coaching positions, they fall in love with the romance of it, ordering jerseys and taking them to team camps and doing all these clinics and whatever. I mean, that's the romance of coaching. The reality of coaching is, what do you do when you just made a bonehead coaching call and your team loses by 1, or your team is starting to check out on you because you've lost 3 in a row and team morale is down? What's going to happen when you get so-and-so complaining in the stands because little Jimmy or Sally isn't playing enough, and you start to hear those things. That's the reality of coaching. And, in basketball in particular, that's a very intimate setting, because you don't get to hear a lot of the stuff in football sometimes because you're far removed from the stands. I mean, not that there isn't stuff, but for basketball, I mean, people are right on top of you. And that's why I say it is not a very good job for thin-skinned people. You've got to be very confident and know that with the spotlight is going to come criticism. And we are not a society anymore that handles that very well. And so, I mean, like I said, there are so many layers to this onion as to why we have coaching turnover and why people don't want to coach. And we could do an entire podcast on this, but the experience here, we were lucky enough to have our new coach, Kelly Williams, who the kids love, she was our JV coach, want to take a crack at it. And so far the kids are responding. They're scrappy, they're working hard, and they're playing for her. And that's what you want in a coach.
Definitely. So let's start diving in, and we'll do our best to highlight all the new coaches along the way. If we miss one or two, hey, there was 50 of them. All right. So cut us a little slack.
Yeah.
Let's just start in the Great Basin Conference with 4A girls basketball. The big storyline there, of course, is Burley is your defending league champ, but also the defending 4A state champ. But boy, they lost a lot. They lost some very talented seniors to graduation. They lost the player of the year in Amari Whiting. She transferred to Utah. They lost their head coach, Amber Whiting. So now it's kind of created this void in the Great Basin Conference to where Burley, the defending 4A state champs, were picked to finish 6th out of 7 in the preseason coaches poll. So, I mean, let's start with the Bobcats. Usually we would start with the team that's at the top of the preseason poll, but let's start with Burley because they are the defending 4A state champs. They are working in a new head coach, Nicole Baker, kind of similar to Jerome. She'd been an assistant. Now she's the head coach. And it's not like the cupboard's completely bare. She's got the Cook twins to build around. Haley Chapa comes back as well. But that to me is the big story, is what does Burley look like as they try to repeat?
Oh man, it's going to be a rebuilding year. There's no question about it. You know, you don't lose a player like Amari Whiting and then think you're going to pick it up where you left off. You know, she was obviously best 4A player in the state. You just don't replace that. And she was one of those players that just made everybody around her better. You know, and a lot of times you get one of those players and everybody watches her. Well, you don't have anybody to sit back and watch and let them carry you anymore. So Burley's going to have to find their identity. You know, Baker's going to do a great job. She's young. She's, you know, involved in the program, but it's going to be a rough go for Burley this year, I'm afraid. But, you know, they'll be okay eventually. They just got to find themselves after losing so much.
Yeah, Burley off to a 1-5 start this year. The one win came by 2 points over Century in the season opener, and Century similarly is a team that's down a little bit, but they've got a dynamic individual player. And so they were able to beat Century 54-52. But since then, they've had some close losses, and they've also had a couple of blowout losses. I think probably most encouraging for Burley was last night, actually. We're recording this on Wednesday, the 30th. They played Twin Falls last night and only lost 45-41. Twin Falls was picked as the preseason favorite in our preseason coaches poll. Twin Falls was picked 1, Minico was picked 2, and so far that's bearing out. Both teams are 2-0 in league play.
Yeah, you know, and you're right. That was a huge kind of moral victory for Burley too, just to prove to themselves, hey, we can play with some of the top dogs in this conference, regardless of who we lost. So sometimes a loss like that does wonders for a team. And it's like, hey, we believe now. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what Burley does springboarding off of that 4-point loss to Twin, who is supposed to be one of the top dogs in the conference.
Yeah, so Twin Falls is led by Hallie Egbert. She's kind of the key player for the Bruins, as they just seem to always have really good female athletes, soccer, volleyball, basketball, whatever it is. Minico is a team that's really, I think, ready to turn the corner. They've got CJ Carly Latta. She's a great volleyball and basketball player, and she can handle the ball like nobody's business. She's a really good, smooth point guard for that Minico team. I think she might be the best overall player in the conference this year, although I know Maddie Keener from Mountain Home is also very talented. But I don't know. What do you think between Twin and Minico? Who has the edge?
Well, you know, and that's an interesting question, because I think those two teams are both really good. I mean, you look at Minico and what Lotta's able to do. She's an Amari Whiting in a red jersey in a way for what she is to her team, you know, and so she's one of those players that is going to make everybody around her better. And she's going to be one of those locker room people that, you know, gets everybody going, because when you don't have that, then a coach will face sometimes their worst nightmare. And that is when a loss affects a coach more than it does its players. And that shows that you don't have that leadership on the team. And that's why that leadership is so important to a team, because you know, the loss should affect every single player. And not the coach more. Well, Lotta brings that. She brings that leadership. She is going to battle for the number one player in the conference. I think you hit the nail on the head with Keener. But I would be interested to see what Minico does with Twin, because Twin's one of those teams that I think is going to struggle to score at times because they don't have that standout scoring player. But Twin is Twin. They're going to play as a unit. They're going to be scrappy. They're going to get after you. And that's what's going to be interesting. So, yeah, everything's shaping up like it's supposed to right now, but we're going to start diving into conference play a lot more, even this week with some games.
Yes, Minico travels to Twin for the first time Thursday, December 8th. They will then play each other again towards the end of the year in January. It'll be really interesting. So Twin was 1, Minico was 2. Jerome was picked 3rd in the preseason coaches poll. Mountain Home was picked 4th, Canyon Ridge 5th. I think me personally, Scott, I would slide Mountain Home and Canyon Ridge ahead of Jerome just because Jerome did lose a lot and they are kind of a younger team this year, right?
No, it's a group here in Jerome that we are going to have struggles scoring the basketball at times, but we're scrappy and tenacious, and depth could be a problem, but depth is a problem in girls basketball regardless. But I think we're going to find out a lot this Thursday, tomorrow actually, when Mountain Home and Jerome tangle. And we'll see kind of where the pecking order falls, because Mountain Home's my sleeper. They've got an experienced coach who's one of the best. They've got an outstanding point guard, is what you need to be successful, and a scorer in Maddie as well. And so Mountain Home is kind of my dark horse to see what they're able to do against, the Twins and the Minicos. Jerome still have got a ways to go. They got to find a scorer. And Emma Allen does a great job of putting the ball in the basket, but they're going to have to find other ways to score. So I still think there's a lot to shake out in this conference. A lot.
Definitely. Mountain Home has been to state the past couple of years, led by the Keeners, Brent Keener, the coach, Maddie Keener, the point guard. Canyon Ridge is kind of my sleeper, Scott. They lost 5 seniors from last year's team, but only one of them was a starter. So they returned 4 starters. They've got some really good athletes, Lily Teskey, Ava Martin. I don't know. I think Canyon Ridge is primed to maybe make a leap into that upper echelon, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, Canyon Ridge, if they can replace their top 2 scorers they lost from last year, then like Jordan Roberts, Logan Roberts, they were rebounders, they were scorers. If they can find that piece in people like Teskey and Geiger and Dilly Martin, I mean, those girls are going to, if they can come together, you might be right. Canyon Ridge and Kevin Cato, who's an experienced coach, 7 years with Canyon Ridge, and he spent 15 on the boys' side in Hagerman. He's definitely a guy that can bring talent together.
Yeah, there's some good veteran coaches in this league. Keener at Mountain Home, Cato at Canyon Ridge, Anna Bateman at Minico does a fantastic job as well. And then Burley was picked 6th. Wood River picked to finish 7th. Wood River, they're going to be coached by Kevin Stilling, the athletic director at Wood River this year.
I tell you what, Stilling, who's a good friend of mine, the athletic director at Wood River, just a top-notch guy, also coached their soccer team when they went to state. I mean, and so we just called him Ted Lasso the whole time and had so much fun. Now we're going to have to come up with something new to call him as he's taken over the girls program. So I don't know what, and Kevin's a basketball guy too, because his wife coached Wood River for a very long time. And matter of fact, she was coaching when I was coaching the girls here at Jerome. And so, I know them well. And, Kevin's a basketball guy. His wife is just a really good basketball mind. So the interesting thing about the conference, though, for the first time in a long time, is we have 2 teams here in the Great Basin that are only going to have 2 basketball teams. Normally, you have a freshman team, a C team, a JV team, and a varsity team, right? Well, Mountain Home and Wood River both are going to have just 2 teams. And it kind of goes to show the trend that sometimes high school sports takes, and we're in it now, where participation numbers are down. And you saw that in football, you saw it in fall sports. We're starting to see it in basketball now too.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. I just, I would have run through a brick wall to make I got cut as a sophomore from my basketball team. And now at my high school, they can't even get enough kids to field the JV team. It's like, what happened?
Yeah, I know exactly. I mean, it's amazing the trends and society and the way things are going. We just aren't living in that Americana vibe anymore, to where kids are just all American kids and they want to be in charge of this and running through walls. Like you said, there's just so many options available to them with whatever it is. And with, society changing its values the way that it does. I mean, kids are just like, screw this, man. I'm not going to play. And we're seeing a lot of it.
For sure. Let's move to,
again, don't get me started. That's a whole new podcast.
That's right. Let's move to the 3A classification and the SCIC. Kimberly, the preseason favorite. They're breaking in a new head coach and Scott Plew, and so far so good. I'd say they're off to a 4-1 start. After that, you had Buell and Filer each tied for second. Buell also working in a new head coach this year in Jessica Montgomery. So we saw it in volleyball, right? Kimberly was the 3A champs. It's a lot of those same athletes that are now putting on the basketball sneakers.
And you see that a lot. Volleyball sets the tone for girls sports, because like you said, a lot of those girls are going to be playing basketball. And, with Scott Plew inheriting, I don't want to say inheriting, he's going to do a great job, good coach, but, he's going to have that core of volleyball players that ran the table, went undefeated on their way to a state title, stepping onto the basketball floor. And that's going to be huge, and football is the same way. Football sets the tone for boys sports, so if you've got a really rough football team, sometimes it didn't do so well. A lot of times that translates over to struggles in basketball, because it's going to be a lot of those same guys. For Kimberly, Kimberly's got something in the water over there. They've got athletes coming out left and right, boys and girls. And they're going to have a lot of good returning players. Kelsey Stanger, Mikkel Wright, Macy Dilly. They've got some weapons. What they are going to struggle with is they've got to find a ball handler, the floor general that's going to be able to direct traffic and handle the basketball. They can figure that out. They got the rest of the pieces. So we'll see what happens.
Very strong inside with Wright and Dilly, especially underneath. Let's talk about Buell. Jessica Montgomery, first-year head coach, but she's been a long-time assistant coach, and of course, she also runs the local twos gym in Buell as well, and does all sorts of shooting camps. And she's a great basketball mind. I think this was a perfect fit, her taking over the Buell program.
Oh, absolutely. You hear Jessica Montgomery and you're like, well, I don't know who that is. You hear Jessica Twos. Yeah, you know who that is. Same girl. She's been a big staple in the Valley with skill development and camps and ball handling and shooting and all that kind of stuff. So she's going to do a great job in building foundation for Buell in the fundamental skill area. She'll get the experience with the X's and O's and all that kind of stuff as she carries on. But I think the one thing I like about Jessica is that, she's going to coach these players fundamentally correct, because when you don't have a fundamentally sound group as a coach, you end up coaching every single dribble that's on the floor. You understand? So it's like every pass you're coaching it, every dribble and you can't do that as a coach, which is why the fundamentals are so important, because you want to watch away from the basketball. You want to watch what other teams are doing. As you said, a double stagger. You want to watch all these things, but you can't if you're so worried about dribbling it off your foot or throwing the ball away. And that's what Jessica's going to do for Buell, is fundamentally make them a lot more sound. And then I hope she sticks with it, and becomes a staple at Buell in the girls basketball program.
Definitely. Filer picked to tie for second along with Buell. Filer is the defending conference champs. They lost the conference player of the year in Lexi Monson. What a dynamic athlete she was. But they do return Jocelyn Bailey, a first-team all-conference selection. And Clayton Nebeker is back to coach Filer as well. So Filer's always dangerous, I feel like.
Yeah, Filer's always going to have good kids as well. Coach Nebeker was the coach of the year for the conference last year. And, they're coming back with a winning record, one of the Matter of fact, I think the only team in that conference last year that had a winning record, if I'm not mistaken. And so, yeah, he's experienced. I mean, you look at the coaching tree in this conference. You've got, Jessica Montgomery, her first year, Scott Plough, first year, Nebeker, second year, and Goodings, Derek Lyons in his third year. So, I mean, you've got a young kind of coaching tree here in this conference. But Filer will be right there. They'll battle Kimberly, and there should be another good conference with this group and the changes that this conference made.
Yep, and Gooding picked to finish fourth, but they did make it all the way to the state play-in game last year where they fell. Coach Lyons is the elder statesman of the conference in year number 3, which is funny to think about. Izzy Stockham is going to be a great athlete for Gooding this year. Let's move to the 2A and the Canyon Conference. This is like most things, a 2-team affair. It's Declo, it's Wendell. Declo is the favorite. Wendell is the team that has more to prove, as Declo has kind of had a grip on this conference in the past couple of years. But I don't know, flip a coin, right? It's going to come down to a best of 3 game series essentially at districts.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Wendell and Declo, and this is what you do every single year, I mean, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, or whatever the case is, it's like Wendell and Declo. Geez, we were so sick of you. We're tired of all this. I mean, I can only imagine what they're going through in that 2-team conference. But yeah, you're right. This has been owned by Declo. I mean, it's been since 2016 that Wendell has won the conference in girls basketball. So Declo, first-year head coach, Cody Powers, another first-year guy. He's got 2 all-conference players returning in Mallory and Silcock. And so he's going to have the upper hand here, and in Wendell, Coach Lamb, he's got one of his all-conference players coming back. The other one graduated. Ainsley Clark returns. So there's going to be some players with these 2 teams, and it could be some battles, like always.
The early returns for Declo look very good to me, Scott. They beat Firth in their season opener in double overtime, 51-50. Firth is a strong program year in, year out in the 2A ranks. They just lost to Buell last Tuesday by 1, 37-36. We just got done talking about how good of a 3A team Buell is. And now they have an interesting challenge coming up tonight, Scott, where they will host Aberdeen, which was the 2A runner-up a year ago. So I think that could be a measuring stick for Declo as well this year in terms of statewide, where do they fit in? But a 2-1 start so far for the Hornets. They're off to a good start. Let's move to the 1A classification, and let's tackle this 10-team gauntlet that is the Snake River Conference. The preseason coaches poll. This one was one of the more difficult ones to chart because there's really 4 teams all at the top that I think are all capable of finishing 1 through 4. It's Oakley, Cary, Murtaugh, Raft River in that order in the preseason poll, but any of those 4 I could see, getting to state.
Yeah, I mean, this is a massive conference. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that the Great Basin 10 existed when we had Preston and Pokey and Century as part of the conference. I mean, it was like you said, it was a gauntlet. And this conference, and we know how competitive a lot of these teams are when we talk football, with these guys and volleyball and whatnot. This is not going to be any different when you talk about what these teams have. And for Oakley, they're bringing back some players, and I think they're the top of the mountain until they're knocked off. But I like what Oakley brings back for sure.
Yeah, it starts with Fallon Bedke, right? She's 6 feet tall, down low, good post presence. And then they've got Kylan Jones, who's a great athlete. Addie Mitten, to me, might be the best on-ball defender I've seen in the last year and a half in basketball, boys or girls. I saw Oakley at the 1A D1 state tournament last year, Scott, and Addie Mitten really impressed me with the way she defended the ball. She just gets after it. And so I like those defensive type of players. So she was a personal favorite of mine. Matt Payton, of course, veteran coach. His daughter, Hope Payton, is back to run the point. Oakley, to me, is the team to beat. They're the team that's gotten to state. And with Cary, it's the same questions we had during football season, where Cary has been a perennial power, perennial state participant at the 1A D2 level. They've got a great coach in Marilee Sears, but the question is now, how does Cary adjust moving up to the 1A D1 level? They're going to be just fine. They've got good athletes in Jane Park and Bernice Vargas, but just like football, that to me is the other storyline, is how does Cary adjust to moving up a level?
And I think Cary's going to be just fine. We had our questions for football and they were answered. And I think Cary is a fit for this. I mean, they were playing above the D2 level anyway. They were just that good. So I think they are more than ready to take on this bigger conference in all sports. And you're right. I think Cary is going to be right there. I mean, with Park and Vargas, kind of leading the way for Cary, this is a team that's going to be pretty good. And I think they're going to battle Oakley, a couple of times. But, Oakley's got the pedigree. Coach Payton and his defense. I mean, and you talked about that a little bit too, because a lot of this conference tournament gets played over here at Jerome. And so I host it for them. And so I'll, sit at the scorer's table, sometimes get on the mic, spin some records, whatever it is I do. And I got to watch some of these guys or girls. And what you said about Oakley and Mitten and the way that they guard the basketball and the way they get after you is right on the money. And I think that's the difference maker right there.
Yeah. Now, for all that glowing talk that we've had about Oakley, Scott, last night, Raft River defeated Oakley pretty convincingly. 48-27 was the final score. Raft River was the other team that got to state last year along with Oakley. And in fact, Raft River got further. They made it to semifinal night on Friday, whereas Oakley lost right away. And this is a Raft River team led by Coach Bart Dieters that also brings back a lot of key players from last year. When you look at players like Jesse Knudsen and Reagan Jones, and they are similar to Oakley. They defend really well. They're going to make you earn everything they've got. And even though they beat Oakley by 19 last night, it was a non-conference game. Only one, since it's a 10-team conference, only the second matchup counts in the league standings. So an early salvo delivered by Raft River last night.
Oh, absolutely. And not to tout Oakley above everybody. I mean, we see that in football too. Oakley Raft River, and here we go again. But Coach Dieters was the returning coach of the year in that conference, and he definitely has some weapons at his disposal coming back. I mean, player of the year, Carolyn Schumann, was a big part of that last year. They've got, like you mentioned, Jones and Knudsen. They've got Bowden and they do have some core returners that is going to put them at the top of that list vying for a conference championship. And you're right. They struck the first blow against Oakley convincingly to let them know that, hey, maybe we're the top dog this year.
Yeah. And like I said, really that top four, I think, could all beat up on each other with Oakley and Raft River and Cary. And I think Murtaugh is the fourth team that's got to be considered. Todd Jensen has coached the girls for several years now at Murtaugh. They went on a nice run to make it to state volleyball. And again, it's a lot of those same athletes. Addie Stanger kind of leads the way, but there's Ashley Stanger. And I mean, Murtaugh is loaded with good, talented athletes also. Yeah,
no question. And they do have a veteran coach, and Jensen's a guy that just coaches everything, from football to girls basketball. He knows how to handle athletes. And I think that's a crucial piece of a puzzle when you think about a basketball season, or any season for that matter, because what a coach has to remember, and this is where experience comes in too, is that every season it's a marathon and not a sprint, and so we play these games that are early, and it's just one step in this long journey, and an experienced coach knows how to juggle and manage the emotions of their players, they don't peak too soon, and I think that's one of the things. And I'm a philosophy guy, right? So I look at all of these first year coaches and how are they going to manage their players' health, emotions, effort throughout the course of a season without having every single game they play be a championship game. You know what I'm saying? And a veteran coach knows how to stretch that out. And so I'm really that's one of the sub plots that I watch with all these new coaches to see how that works out.
So you mentioned the new coaches. Let's talk about, so if there's a top 4, then I think the next 6 could all be grouped together in whatever order, because all of them have new coaches except for Shoshone, where Coach Tim Chapman and Carly Chapman is going to be their key player. That's really the only program that has had long stability in terms of a head coach, right? Shoshone?
Yeah. And Tim is a great guy. Another good friend of mine. He's done wonders at Shoshone over the course of his many, many, many years. I mean, Shoshone's got 3 state titles, 2 of them within the past 10 years, in 2015 and 2019. So, Shoshone under Coach Chapman, even though they're picked to finish 8th in the conference, don't count out experience, as far as the coaching. If he's got enough pieces to play with, then he'll know what to do with them.
And then the rest, it's all new coaches, Scott. Lighthouse Christian, Jesse Clark, Valley, Holly Hall. Hanson has a new head coach. Glens Ferry has a new head coach in Carly McCone. Wasn't that long ago she was playing college basketball, and she was a pretty good one from Glens Ferry. She's back to coach her alma mater. And then you've got Castleford. This to me is the really intriguing one. Castleford has got a new coach, but it's a guy that's not a stranger to coaching. It's Buck Taylor, the longtime softball coach from Filer, the longtime championship winning coach from Filer. All of a sudden I look at him and go, he's the girls basketball coach at Castleford. He says, hey, I have no idea how the team's going to be. This is new to me as well. But hey, coaching experience is coaching experience, no matter the sport, right?
There's truth to that, because like I said, you've got to know how to handle and manage athletes. And it's not about wins and losses all the time. It's about getting your players to perform at their best. And, I've always had the mantra that, wins and losses, they take care of themselves. Winning is the byproduct of doing things the right way. And by doing things the right way, you learn to manage your athletes. And Buck's been a guy that's been around forever, even though first year coaching, he's at basketball here at Castleford. It wasn't too long ago. Well, it was a long time ago, about 20 years ago, he and I played softball together, so, and seeing him around and continue to excel in the coaching arena, more power to him. He's a great guy.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch throughout the year. And then Hanson, their new coach is TJ Berry. I blanked on who their coach was for a second, but those are all the new coaches at the 1A D1 level. We've got some new coaches at the 1A D2 level as well at Camas County. We'll talk about them in a second. But when you look at this Sawtooth Conference, it's just a 4-team conference. They're only going to get one spot to state. It's going to be very competitive at the top between Dietrich and Richfield. Dietrich was picked to win the preseason coaches poll, but Richfield is right behind, and Coach Buck Hendren and Coach Rick Estelle for Richfield and Dietrich, respectively, have both been there for a couple of years, both really good, and it's going to be fascinating to watch those two duke it out all year.
Yeah, and there's another experience factor right there with Coach Estelle. I mean, we just got done, with football with Dietrich, called those games up at Holt, and the Estelle name is just kind of synonymous with Dietrich sports. And here's another one. And, you're right, Dietrich, Richfield, they're going to battle it out. And, they're just miles down the road from each other. And it's kind of like that Tobacco Road series between Dietrich and Richfield. But yeah, there's going to be some pretty good players for both of those teams. And I think those are the 2 teams in that conference that are going to kind of battle each other with, the rest of them, Hagerman and Camas, trying to keep pace.
Only 13 miles separate those 2 communities, Scott. So those 2 matchups are going to be phenomenal when they happen. Dietrich has the reigning offensive player of the year, another Estelle, Haley Estelle. First team all conference selection. Sage Hubert is back as well. Richfield's got Casey Hendren, who's been the point guard for like 10 years, I feel like, for Richfield. She's been playing since day one of her freshman season. They've got Madeline Long, Madison Jones, or Shelby Jones. Richfield, to me, has the better depth. And I still kind of lean Richfield personally, but flip a coin between Dietrich and Richfield. That's going to be a lot of fun. So those are the 2 veteran coaches. And then you've got 2 new coaches. Hagerman will be led by Nick Gonzalez, who previously was at Hanson. So he goes from Hanson to Hagerman. And then Camas County lost their coach, John Boats, but they also lost Ashley Boats, who accounted for, 75% of their offensive production from a year ago. So it's going to be interesting to see what Camas County is able to put together. They always have to run against really low numbers. It was encouraging to see that they were able to get enough for a team, though.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up too, because you were calling those games at state with Ashley Boats there and Coach Boats, and you had the conversation with them about their numbers and how they thought maybe we weren't going to be able to field a team. And that's one of the struggles that I don't think people realize sometimes at these D1, D2 schools is they play 8-man football for a reason, and that's 8 guys on the field, right? Well, you can't play 3-man basketball or 3-woman basketball. You just don't. You still got to put 5 on the floor. And sometimes in these small schools, it's a challenge to get it done. And you learned that firsthand from Coach Boats when you talked to him and called his games at state.
Yeah, it was really exciting that they were able to get to state. That was 2 years ago. It had been the first time they'd been to state in years and years and years. And so, they're going to be up against it. Allie Stoltzman is the new coach there this year. But it'll be interesting to see how she brings a younger group along as the season progresses. But man, that was our girls basketball preview, Scott. There's going to be a lot of really good teams again in the Magic Valley and some really dynamic players as well.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we're moving into a new sports season, and with that comes more stories. And every one of these kids and coaches and teams, they've got stories, and we want to start highlighting. So again, if for those that are listening to this, and we get a lot of our following on this podcast is tremendous, by the way. I mean, I hear about it all the time. So if you are listening and you know of kids that have a story or something that's happening, reach out to us, and we would love to highlight those kinds of things on our podcast.
Yeah, you could send me an email, Brandon@IdahoSports.com. And that's what we're all about. We want to shine that spotlight on the athletes, coaches, the stories that make the Magic Valley what it is. And that is magical. And that is very sappy, but it's true.
Well done. Well done.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in. Again, girls basketball previews are complete. They are up on our website, IdahoSports.com. We're adding more and more boys basketball previews with each day. Wrestling coverage, Scott, we're kicking it up a notch this year because there's so many wrestling diehards in the state of Idaho. We are going to launch a weekly wrestling only podcast on IdahoSports.com. It's going to be the Matt Chat Prepcast. And so
I like it.
We've got a rotating cast of wrestling experts. We're going to do it same time every week, Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And we want to hear from the fans. We're going to do it live. So hopefully we can interact with some of those wrestling fans to talk about the biggest wrestling team stories, breakdowns. We're going to have team rankings every week. We're bringing back the individual rankings, the individual statewide rankings by weight class as well.
Wow.
We're very excited.
As if you needed another project.
I know, right? For sure. But the wrestling fans are craving it. So
yes, they are. It's amazing how fanatic a lot of these wrestling, fans are, parents are, whatever. I mean, I didn't realize that until I became AD and I started following our wrestling team around, and we happened to win state that year. And just seeing how passionate they are about this sport. Well, I mean, here we are. We now have started up a women's program. So we have women's wrestling here at Jerome, and we have a team of, 10, 12, 15 girls that are getting ready to head over to Twin tonight and wrestle for the first time. So the popularity of the sport is really booming. So yeah, I mean, your timing is perfect for this podcast, and it's going to be a huge hit. I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely. So if you want your wrestling coverage, I would say most weeks you'll be able to get it on that Matt Chat Prepcast. We'll dabble into wrestling here on the Magic Valley Prepcast as well. But next week, Scott, I think we'll just do the same basketball previews, except this time we'll talk about the boys and teams, players we're keeping an eye on, all that good stuff. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan. Boys season kicks off tonight. for a lot of schools.
Yes, it is fast and furious out of the gate. And again, keep it locked into IdahoSports.com. We're putting new stuff up on the website each and every day. So thanks for tuning into the Magic Valley Prepcast, everybody. For Scott Burton, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.